So, hello again, Dr. Johnson, back to see you one more time. Yeah, we're already up to session 12. Can you believe that? And here's the title for session 12. Get this: The Two Big Difficulties in Living a Virtuous Life. So what are these two big difficulties? Well, they're obstacles for you, and they're obstacles for me in living fully and showing your true spiritual luster, in being as optimistic and as self-directed as you possibly can. These are called, number one is called your shadows, and number two is called your compulsions. These are two inner life forces of darkness that stop you from moving ahead. Now, you might ask, well, how do I know these? How will I get these? Well, you can find out when you take your spiritual strengths profile. I know I keep coming back to that time and time again. But once you have that document, that 19-page document that tells you a whole lot about yourself, you'll really understand what we're talking about here a whole lot more, and I think start using it in your life. So each of your six, what I call signature spiritual strengths or virtue strengths, has a dark side called a shadow. So what is a shadow? It's a place in your personality where the power of your signature virtue strengths are absent, where they're blocked. It's a blind spot within your personality. So let me talk about my own, and I think to use these as an example. So my personality believing, the very first strength of the personality is the believing strength, or the believing function of the personality. And my virtue strength in the believing function of the personality is the virtue of hope. What is hope? Well, hope has been defined various ways. Here's a couple of them. Hope is possessing the inner assurance that the power of love can never be eclipsed. The power of love can never be eclipsed. There's nothing more powerful than the power of love. That's pretty interesting. Another way to describe hope would be owning one's spiritual optimism and inner confidence. If you like optimism and inner confidence, then you'll like the virtue of hope. Another way of describing it is having a conviction. Hope is having the conviction that the power of love will remain the compelling power of the entire grand universe. And finally, the power of hope is the inner power to turn away from pervasive sadness. Because when we're in hope, we're optimistic. There is no pervasive sadness in there. Now, if you turn this around, you say, okay, hope is the virtue strength. What is its shadow? What is a condition where hope is absent? Well, the best word to describe that is probably despair. When you're in despair, hopelessness is despair. I can quite unknowingly move away from my virtue of hope. I can become at times dispirited, disillusioned, irritated, and eventually depressed when I start backpedaling on my own spiritual and general welfare. So how would you just define or describe despair? Well, being dreary, dull, flat, that's despair. Possessing no spiritual luster. Luster is that condition that gives you aliveness, that makes you feel out there and vital and zest-filled and attentive and attractive and all of these things. That's what I call spiritual luster. Despair is also a heaviness, a gloom, a weariness about your personality. And it's also been described as broken-hearted and spiritless. All of this is despair. So all of this pulls me away from my virtue strength of hope. As I move into despair, as I move down the road on this journey, which I don't even know I'm doing most of the time, but I can get there for sure because I've been disillusioned. I've felt dejection. I've even walked around the mess called depression. And it's not fun. That's moving towards despair. I've never been flat against the wall of despair, but I've come close. So that's basically what the shadow is. On the other side of the whole spectrum of power in our personality, we find things, forces, anti-forces that we call, or I call, compulsions. So this is the other side of the spectrum other side of shadow. Shadow's on one side, compulsion's on the other side. A compulsion is a distortion, a contortion, and sometimes even a perversion of your signature virtue strength. Mine happens to be hope. So what's the compulsion of hope? Well, it's a strange word, perhaps. You might think so at first. It's called presumption, taking things for granted. You can't be in hope when you're simply taking things and granted. You're taking things for granted. So what might be some better descriptors for it? Well, when you're in presumption, you have an unrealistic self-permission to take liberties, like, I'm better than everybody else. Oh, I presume. I can also do this. I can expect personal entitlements or preferential favors just because I think I'm me. I'm presuming. Or I can assume that I'll be forgiven without any kind of penance, without saying I'm sorry. That's presumption. And the final thing, which is really kind of celestial, it is celestial, the presumption that I can get myself saved, that I myself can get to heaven. Well, not probably true, okay? While hope is the absolute assurance that there is no power greater than love, presumption perverts me into believing that I can act in any way I want and not block the power of love from operating within me. Well, that's just not true. Presumption does block the power of love. So, what's the bottom line of this? Shadows and compulsions take away your spiritual luster. They invade your true virtue spiritual strengths, and they destroy a lot of you. They destroy your self-esteem. They destroy your mood. They destroy your performance in all 6 functions of your personality. They take away your spiritual luster, and they take away your joy for living. Yes, shadows and compulsions certainly block you from the light of love in you. Now, our virtue strengths spiritual growth and healing plan teaches us 3 things. 1, how to uncover our signature virtues, the true transformative power of our personality. Number 2, how to recognize the confounding influences of shadows and compulsions and exactly what they're doing and allowing us to be more intentional about them. And number 3, to stay centered in our true personality, where your signature spiritual strengths are found. And as you gradually do these 3 things, perform these 3, as you gradually move closer to fulfilling these goals, you'll quite naturally discover what I call your spiritual luster, which is the sweet spot, so to speak, that inner space where you feel integrated, balanced, and whole. And that's the journey, that's the road to health, healing, and true happiness. Thanks a lot. It's been great to be with you today. See you next time.